there actually was some very significant college basketball news over this weekend, and it involves a Hall of Famer. Iona College surprised the college basketball world, announcing the hiring of Rick Pitino as their new basketball coach. Pitino hasn't coached in college since October of 2017, when he was fired at Louisville following an FBI investigation into college basketball. And if you look at his history, well, it is obviously overwhelming. And you see all the Final Fours that he's been to. He's the only coach ever to lead two different teams to national championships, has had some level of success in the NBA as well. You don't need me to tell you who Rick Pitino is. Obviously, he's an iconic and somewhat controversial figure. He's going to join us live tomorrow on the show. I spoke to him over the weekend. But, Seth, what was your thought on Iona hiring Rick Pitino?
I thought I don't think they took a risk. I think, look, Rick Pitino is one of the greatest coaches in the history of our game. He's one of the greatest teachers in the history of our game. Right now, what they're going to do is, I'm sure they did their due diligence, but here's the deal. There's no doubt, even if he's not named in the notice of allegations, all right, there's going to be a head coach responsibility, because the people under his watch obviously will be named in the notice of allegations. And when that happens, he will have a responsibility. He will have some type of penalty. I'm sure Iona understands that, but they were willing not to take that risk, but to go ahead, because Rick Pitino changes basically the whole brand of Iona basketball. He will make Iona what they were back in the Jim Valvano years. He will make them a national brand. They'll be playing in Madison Square Garden. Every single fifth-year grad transfer that's available will have an interest in Iona because of Rick Pitino and his reputation. So I thought it was a little bit outside the box, but if he was going to go anywhere, New York City, where he's from, the key will be he's got to hire the right assistant coaches. Because if you look at the history of his assistant coaches, early in his coaching career, he had some of the best coaches in the history of college basketball. Right now, in the past few years, he didn't have the same quality of assistants.
Seth, what is your reaction to the way the NCAA handled this?
I thought the NCAA did a good job. Obviously, they responded to the NBA when Rudy Gobert went down with the virus. It put a face to the virus. People understood it. This wasn't just a coronavirus that people were talking about. There was a professional athlete that people understood who he was, what he stood for, where he was, the environment that he was in. And once that happened, that basically shut down all of sport, not just the NCAA tournament. And I think there's a process that the NCAA went through. But once Rudy Gobert tested positive, I think everything basically changed and expedited the decision-making process. I think the governor of Ohio also had an impact on all of this as well, as he was going to shut down Dayton and Cleveland for their NCAA tournament in terms of having people in the stands. So I think that what happened with Rudy Gobert probably saved hundreds, maybe thousands of lives because of he put a face to the disease.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, and I think that overall this is a time when it's somewhat easy to criticize, but I understand where the thinking may have been, let's err on the side of trying to do this if it is even remotely possible. And then when it became evident, whether it was the Rudy Gobert factor or whatever, that it just wasn't going to be remotely possible, they called it off in plenty of time. So while I understand people might say be a leader, sometimes waiting to see what others do isn't such a bad idea. In the meantime, I did have quite a few people say to me, and we certainly heard from some coaches, why couldn't they on Selection Sunday or whenever they wanted have announced the 68 teams so at least the players who earned a spot in the tournament would have had a chance to hear their name called? They chose not to do that. What did you think of that?
I was good with it. And here's the reason I was good with it. Only 12 conference tournaments had finished. Because only 12 conference tournaments had finished, there were another 20 that needed to be played. So the amount of information they had was basically inconclusive. And then let's face it, Greeny. So we come out with a bracket. And then all of a sudden you have the last four. And then all of a sudden we're going to have a debate over who should be in, who should be out, with all the problems that were going on in our society with this virus that's basically attacking the world. I think that the decision the NCAA made was a good decision. Look, I'm a basketball junkie. I live and breathe and eat college basketball. But I think this decision, with the information being inconclusive, obviously we know 12 teams earned their bid. We know, obviously, the top of the bracket would have been able to fill out. But we had 20 teams that had an opportunity to earn a bid. We had leagues like the America East that had Vermont and Hartford playing. Which one are you going to put in? So I think that the committee did a good job of deciding that they did not have enough information to put out a field and see the field.